This past July, I did not show up to a party I'd been quietly funding for 12 years. At 7 o'clock that evening, my phone started ringing and didn't stop for the better part of an hour. My name is Norman Ashby. I'm 56 years old, a retired plant foreman from just outside Columbus, Ohio. My wife, Rebecca, passed away 12 years ago from ovarian cancer. She was 43. We had 2 kids, my daughter Cynthia, who's now 34, and my son Jesse, who just turned 28 last spring. I also have a sister, Vera, who is 4 years older than me and has always been the sharpest person in any room she walked into. Rebecca loved her birthday the way some people love a whole season. Late July, every year, she'd string lights across the back porch, and we'd grill too much food and invite everybody she'd ever smiled at. It didn't matter how many people showed up. What mattered was that they came. After she died, I kept it going. I kept it going because the first summer without her, the silence in that backyard in late July was the worst thing I'd ever felt. So the following July, I cleaned the grill, strung the lights myself, and called everyone Rebecca used to call. About 30 people came. Some of them cried. All of them stayed late. It was the right thing to do. That was how it started. Before I go any further, do me a favor and hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet. It helps me more than you know, and I read every comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Now let me take you back to where this thing started coming apart. By year 4, the gathering had outgrown my backyard. Cynthia stepped in. She'd always had her mother's energy for organizing, and she said she wanted to handle it. I was grateful. I took on the costs because I'd always handled the costs, and she took on the clipboard, and that felt like the right split at the time. By year 7, we were renting the Lakeview room at the Harrington Event Center, a converted Victorian house on the edge of town that hosted weddings and corporate dinners. I'd signed the initial contract. My card was on file. Cynthia had the vendor contacts in her phone and the layout sketched on a notepad, and that's how the thing ran. I never thought to question the arrangement because it felt like family. It felt like love. The chair I sat in at my own wife's birthday celebration, at a party I paid for, was near the kitchen door, at the end of the long table, beside my grandson's booster seat. That was where I fit. I want to be honest about how the finances worked. I never saw an invoice until I was already in it. Cynthia would text me in late June. Dad, the Harrington needs the deposit to hold our date, the usual. And the usual was $400. Then 6, then 8 as the event grew. By the last 3 years, the total between the venue, the catering company, and the floral arrangement Cynthia insisted on came to just over $2,000 a year. I paid it because it was Rebecca's birthday, and I'd made a promise to myself to keep it. Nobody at that table ever asked who wrote the check, not once in 12 years. Cynthia's husband is Rick. He's 37, sells cars at a dealership his father partly owns, and carries himself the way men do when they've never had to wonder if they were worth listening to. At the table, he talked over people like it was a hobby. At the table, I was wallpaper. In May, 2 months before the celebration, I went to the Harrington for an unrelated reason. My civic club was scouting it for their fall dinner. I ran into their events manager, a woman named Alice, who recognized me from our annual booking. "Mr. Ashby," she said, "we're looking forward to having your family back this July. Are we still doing the same setup?" "I'd imagine so," I said. "Cynthia usually handles the details." Alice tilted her head, just slightly. "Right, we just hadn't heard from her yet on the catering order, so I wanted to make sure nothing had changed on your end." Your end, not her end. I thought about that on the drive home, because to Alice and to every vendor connected to that evening, there was only one end, mine. The thing that finally made me see, it clearly happened 3 weeks after that. I was over at Cynthia and Rick's for their son's end-of-school cookout. Nice enough afternoon. Their neighbors were there, a couple from 2 doors down, and I heard Rick, by the cooler, telling the husband about the July celebration. He said it with this easy pride, the kind of voice you use when you're describing something you built yourself. "Cynthia does this every year for her mom," he said. "She basically single-hands the whole thing. Food, venue, decorations. It's become a real neighborhood tradition." He paused. "I keep telling her she should go into event planning." The neighbor laughed. Said something I didn't catch. Cynthia was standing right there. She smiled. She didn't say a word. I had a paper plate in my hand with a hot dog on it. I set it down on a fence post. I went to find my grandson and stayed near him for the rest of the afternoon, and I drove home before dark. That night I sat at my kitchen table and did something I hadn't done in 12 years. I pulled up my bank statements and read every one from July, going all the way back to the beginning. I am a numbers man. I spent 30 years managing production schedules and supply budgets. Numbers are where I go when I want the truth. The truth laid out across my kitchen table in the glow of a laptop screen was this: 12 years, $26,000 give or take, not counting gas, not counting the gifts I set quietly beside other people's chairs. The celebration of my wife's life, my money, her name on nothing. I sat with that for 2 hours. I tried every version that made it feel okay. The misunderstanding version, the Cynthia genuinely didn't know version, the I'm just tired version. None of them held. What I came back to instead was the July 4 years ago, when I tried to say a few words about Rebecca at the table. Nothing prepared, just a memory I wanted to share. And Rick checked his watch where I could see it, and Cynthia touched my arm and said, "Dad, let people eat." What I came back to was the placard on the nearest table every year, in a pretty script font, printed on white cardstock, hosted by Cynthia and Rick Lauer. I never put my name on the placard, I never thought to. It was Rebecca's day, I was just keeping it alive. By midnight, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to send a furious text or show up somewhere and embarrass anyone in front of their neighbors. That's not who I am. I was simply going to stop. This year, whoever put their name on the placard would put their name on the contract. Monday morning, I called Alice at the Harrington. I explained that I wanted to transfer the account and all future billing to my daughter's name. I gave Alice Cynthia's number and her email. I told her the event could go forward exactly as planned. I just wouldn't be the one paying for it. Alice was professional. She said she'd reach out to Cynthia that week to get a card on file. I made 2 more calls. The caterer, the florist. Same conversation each time, same result. The accounts were now in Cynthia's name. If she wanted the orders to stand, she'd hear from them directly. Then I sat in my kitchen and drank my coffee and felt for the first time in a long while like a man who knew where his money was going. Jesse came by Wednesday. He'd finished a job across town and stopped in the way he always does. Still in his work clothes, boots leaving mud on the mat. I told him what I'd done. He sat down. He picked up his coffee mug and looked at the table for a while without speaking. "How long have you known?" he finally asked. "I've always known a little," I said. "I just didn't want to know all the way." "Dad," he shook his head. "I've tried to say something to Cynthia. More than once. She shuts it down before I get 2 words out. Says you like doing it, that it's your way of staying connected to Mom." He looked up. I should have pushed harder. "You were one voice against a room," I said. "That's a hard place to stand." He put his mug down. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing loud. Just tell the truth if anyone asks you straight." He nodded once, slow and certain, the same way my father used to nod when something was settled. There was something in the way he held that, like he'd been carrying a weight of his own, and was finally setting it down on the table between us. Cynthia called Thursday. Her voice was bright and careful, the way it gets when she's managing something. "Dad, I got a call from the caterer about an account change. Can you ring them and clear it up?" "It's not a mistake," I said. "I transferred the accounts to you." A pause. "What do you mean you transferred them?" "I mean the vendors have your contact now. You'll need to put a card on file." "Dad," her voice shifted. "The event is 6 weeks away." "They'll walk you through it," I said. "Same orders, same setup. You just need to sign for it yourself this time." "Are you saying you're not covering it?" "That's what I'm saying." Silence then. "Why would you do this? What did I do?" I didn't tell her about the cookout, about Rick's voice by the cooler. I'd thought about it and decided she didn't get to know the exact moment. She needed to understand the pattern. "For 12 years, I said, I've paid for a celebration of your mother's life. And at the table where I sit, I'm next to the booster seat, near the kitchen door. My name isn't on the placard, and your husband tells the neighbors you put the whole thing together yourself." I kept my voice level. "I'm done funding a party where I'm the guest nobody introduced." The line was very quiet. "This isn't fair," she said. "Which part?" I asked. She hung up a few minutes later. By the following week, the calls had started. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. A friend of Rebecca's family. Every message wore the same coat. "We're worried, Norman. Cynthia's upset. The grandkids will be disappointed. Don't let pride ruin Rebecca's day." Rebecca's day, as though I needed to be reminded whose day it was. For about 48 hours, I nearly folded. I want to be honest about that. The pull to fix it, to just cover the deposit, and settle back into being the man nobody had to think about. That pull was strong. It's always strong when you've been doing something for 12 years, and a whole family has organized itself around the assumption that you'll keep doing it. Then Vera called. She listened to me for 10 minutes. Then she said, "You've been funding the memorial for the woman you loved so that your son-in-law can take credit for it with the neighbors. You're done now. That's correct. Don't you move." I didn't move. If you're watching this and you know exactly what I'm talking about, that pull, that guilt, the voice that sounds like love but costs you everything, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And hit subscribe because the night of the party is still coming, and it's the part I'm still thinking about. Rick came to the house on a Friday night, 2 weeks before the event. He knocked hard. I opened the door and he was standing there in his dealership polo, jaw tight. That closer's energy turned mean. "This has to stop," he said. "You're putting Cynthia in an impossible position." "Come in," I said. He came in, but he didn't sit. He stood in my living room like he was appraising it, and told me I was being unreasonable. That family didn't operate like a business transaction. That I was letting some grudge wreck something beautiful. He used the word beautiful without blinking. "Who do you think keeps this family together?" he said. "Cynthia works herself half to death every July to honor your wife. And you're yanking the rug because your feelings got hurt?" "What has Cynthia spent on the event?" I asked. "Over 12 years. Do you know the number?" That stopped him. "In dollars," I said. "What has she personally spent?" His mouth opened, closed. "I know the number," I said, "because it's on my bank statements. Every cent, for 12 years. Something moved across his face. He recovered quickly, the way salesmen do. "The contracts have names on them," I said. "Whoever's name is on it pays it. That's how it's always worked. You two just never had to read them." I walked to the door and opened it. The late July heat came in off the porch. "Drive safe, Rick." He left. There was nothing left for a man to say when the quiet answer won't move. I locked the door and stood in my living room for a moment, listening to the house. Then I went out back and watered the tomatoes Rebecca had planted the summer before she got sick, that I'd kept growing every year, because I didn't know how to stop. The day of the celebration I stayed home. I put on some music. Around 5 Vera called and we talked for a while. Then, just before 7, a different kind of quiet settled over the kitchen. The phone buzzed once, the caterer, then again, the Harrington, then Cynthia's name glowing on the screen. I watched it ring. I set it face down. I'd said everything clearly and kindly. There was nothing left to negotiate. Then Vera called again. Her voice was low and steady, but there was something underneath it. "You need to come down here," she said. "Vera? Not to pay. To be in the room when the room finds out." A pause. I could hear the party behind her, music and voices gone strange with tension. "You've given 12 summers to keeping Rebecca's name alive in that hall. Don't give away the right to be seen for it by sitting home alone." I looked at my wallet on the kitchen counter. I left it there on purpose. I picked up my keys. I drove to the Harrington with nothing in my pockets but my phone and my keys. I want you to know that. No wallet, not a dime. The event room looked the way it always looked. String lights, white tablecloths, the floral centerpieces. Rebecca's photo on a small easel near the entrance. The one from the summer she turned 38, laughing at something just off camera that I still remembered. I stood there a moment longer than I meant to. 40-some people. Family, friends, a few of Cynthia and Rick's neighbors, the Hendersons from 2 doors down, the Warfields from across the street. People who'd spent 12 Julies in rooms I'd paid for, complimenting Cynthia on what a beautiful job she'd done. Cynthia saw me from across the room. Something crossed her face, relief. She moved toward me, voice low, pitched just for us. "Dad, thank God. Alice needs someone to settle the balance and I don't have. Please, just tell her it'll be handled." "Cynthia," I said quietly, "I didn't come about the balance." She went still. Alice came over then, professional, apologetic, holding her folder. She looked between the two of us and said what she had to say the way people do when they're just doing their job and don't realize they're standing in the middle of something larger than a billing question. "I just need to get tonight's balance settled," she said. "When we transferred the account last month, We flagged that the final payment was due this evening. She hesitated, then added the thing that changed the room. I should mention, in 12 years the booking was always in perfect order, always under the same name, paid in full every year. She glanced at me, always under Mr. Ashby's name. Mrs. Henderson was standing 3 feet away. She wasn't trying to hear, she just did. The room didn't go loud. It went the other kind of quiet, where people stop moving and start recalculating. I watched it travel across the faces closest to us, the slow reordering of a fact they'd held for years. Everyone turned, just slightly, toward the placard on the nearest table, hosted by Cynthia and Rick Lauer. Then they turned toward me. Rick stepped forward with his salesman's smile. There's been a miscommunication. There's been no miscommunication. Jesse was there. I hadn't heard him come in. He stood in the middle of that room in a clean shirt. He'd gone home after work and changed before he came, which told me something, and he spoke without raising his voice. For 12 years, my father paid for this night, every dollar of it. The venue, the catering, the flowers on those tables. He let that sit. And every year he sat by the kitchen door and was told he was in the way. Nobody laughed. Nobody touched anyone's arm. The room was simply still. Vera stepped up beside my son. My sister, who is 60 years old and carries herself like a woman who has never once needed permission to speak. I've watched this for 12 years, she said, and her voice carried without any effort. Watched my brother fund a memorial for his wife while the only thing in that room that wasn't his was the credit. She looked at Cynthia without cruelty, just honesty. Your father is not the guest nobody introduced. He's the reason any of us have had a July to come back to. Cynthia's mouth opened, closed. For the first time in a very long time, nobody in the room filled the silence for her. No easy laugh, no careful subject change. The quiet was hers, all of it. I looked at my daughter across that room. She wasn't performing. The hostess was gone. There was just my kid, 34 years old, standing with both hands at her sides, looking at me the way she used to when she was small and had broken something she couldn't fix herself. I said what I came to say, quietly, no theater. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. That's not why I came. I looked around at the room, neighbors, cousins, friends, people I'd fed for 12 years without one of them knowing it was me. I kept this going because Rebecca loved her birthday, and as long as we gathered for it, I could tell myself she was still with us. I'm not sorry for a single year of that. I felt the old grief move, quiet and familiar, the way it always does in July. But I'm done keeping it at the cost of my own name. Whoever hosts pays. That's fair. That's how it should have been from the start. I looked at Rick. He looked at the floor. If you want me at this table as a father, I said, I'll be here. If what you need is a checkbook, you'll have to find another one. I turned and walked out into the warm July night. Behind me I could hear the room beginning to breathe again. Low, uncertain, the way a room does when the air has changed and nobody quite knows the new footing. I drove home and sat on the back porch where Rebecca's lights used to hang, and I watched the fireflies come up out of the grass. The party didn't recover. Jesse told me people drifted out within an hour, polite excuses offered and accepted. Rick was quiet all the way home. The Hendersons, who'd heard everything Alice said, were quiet in a different way. The kind that doesn't stay quiet once people get back to their own kitchen tables. Cynthia paid what she could that night and arranged the rest with Alice over 6 weeks. Part on a card, the balance spread out, the full weight of one evening landing on the woman who'd taken credit for 12 of them. I won't pretend I didn't feel something hearing that. Not satisfaction, closer to grief. It's a hard thing to watch your child feel a weight you've been carrying for them. Jesse called the next morning. You holding up? Better than I expected, I said. Vera sent a text. Rebecca would have done it 10 years sooner. Love you. That one stayed with me. 2 months later, Cynthia came to the house alone, just her. She sat at my kitchen table and turned her coffee mug in her hands for a while without speaking. I knew, she finally said. That's the part I can't get past. I knew you were paying for it. I let it become normal, and then it was just the way things were, and I stopped looking at it. I made it easy not to look, I said. I never let the numbers be visible. I never said no. If I'd kept it visible from the start, you'd have had to see it. I let that sit between us. That's on me too. She shook her head. Don't do that. Don't take my part. I'm not, I said. I'm just being honest about the whole thing. I'm sorry, Dad. She said it plainly. No performance in it. For the placard. For not correcting Rick. For for letting people believe a story that wasn't true. I let the quiet sit a moment. I forgive you, I said. Not because everything's fixed, because carrying it is heavier than setting it down, and I'm done carrying things that aren't mine. She cried a little, the real kind that surprises you. I put my hand over hers on the table. The following July, we held a smaller gathering. My backyard. I grilled. Jesse brought potato salad and his girlfriend and Trudy, a good woman who asked me about Rebecca like she genuinely wanted to know. Vera came early and bossed me around my own grill, which was exactly right. Cynthia came. She brought a pasta dish she'd made herself. Came out a little under-seasoned, and she said so before anyone else could. She helped set up without being asked. She sat near me, not at the end of the table, not by the kitchen door. There was no placard. Nobody needed one. Late in the evening, after the kids had worn themselves out and Jesse was washing dishes he'd insisted on washing, Cynthia found me by the back fence. I want to do this again next year, she said. Good, I said. I want to do it right. She looked at me, and I want your name on it. That was what I'd been waiting 12 years to hear. Not the apology, though I needed that too. This. My daughter saying my name belongs on the thing I built. It always did, I said. She nodded. We stood there together in the dark, the fireflies doing what they do every July, indifferent to all of it, which felt right. Here is what I know now that I wish someone had given me at 40. Plain as I can say it. You can pay for everything and still belong to nothing. Belonging comes from being seen, not from being useful. The day I stopped writing the checks was the day they finally had to look at me and see the man who'd given 12 summers to keeping a promise he'd made to the woman he loved. I keep my own name now. I earned it.